Hello and welcome to the Navy Blue Corner. I'm Ian, joined as always by my good mate Lockie, and we are back with a big trade period preview episode, and we'll be going through all the trade rumors, discussing all of those that could leave Carlton, but most importantly, and honestly, the more exciting part, we're going to discuss all the players that could potentially find their way to Carlton this trade period. There is plenty to talk about in this episode, but first, Lockie, how are you? And after our list analysis episode last week, how are you feeling about the list and I guess the ability to hopefully solve the list problems heading into the 2025 season?
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling optimistic about what we could see over these next few weeks. I want to say that I'm confident. Let's back the team in, back old Nicky in. We like what he's saying out in the media at the moment. And, let's see him get to work, as you put it.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we had a look at the list needs and saw those that could go out, we figured it out pretty well. There was not a ridiculous amount of changes that do need to happen. It's not as if we need to cull the entire list. There's plenty of strengths, but there are still some weaknesses, few things we need to address. Hopefully, we can go through them all. Now, before we jump straight into all the trade news and discussing it in full, there's just a couple of things I want to talk about. The Navy Noise segment for some broader Carlton chatter, because there's been a few different discussions over the last week. I think Terry from Blue Abroad has been well and truly into this this week. So I thought it was worthwhile to discuss, I guess, maybe the lack of news that we've heard within the club around movement and improvement, starting off at the assistant coaches, because we said in our season review episode, the conclusion of 2024, we believe the bigger problem was not actually the list itself, but probably around the coaching and the decision-making around the team that would be out there on the weekend. So are you surprised right now around that lack of movement and change as far as assistant coaches or even administrators are concerned?
No, I wouldn't say I'm surprised. I mean, I guess there's a few different elements to it. I haven't seen much discourse on this myself, but from where I stand and from when we're recording right now, the John Nichols medal starts in about 5 minutes, right? So I feel like potentially timing-wise, if there was changes, maybe you wouldn't expect it to happen until after kind of the club all come together, potentially. From my standpoint, I don't necessarily think it's a big sweeping change of assistant coaches necessarily, and maybe it is more just about trying different things and the way that they're working together. I'm not sure. What about you? Are you surprised?
A little bit, and that's probably just around how maybe I see things improving when you keep going in with the same opinions, same assistant coaches around that. I guess I'm in the two minds. There's easily the camp maybe where you're looking at, is what they need, the stability that the club always talks about, is what's going to actually improve us just a bit more time with the players, more time with the coaching group. We often say cohesion and building that chemistry. Maybe what they need is just a few more years with each other. They haven't spent a great deal of time with Voss and they've just brought in Jordan Russell for this season. Do you need that dynamic to just evolve over one more year to get that right? Potentially, I guess, when it hasn't really been working throughout the entire period, I'm just surprised there hasn't been one movement. And I don't necessarily know who that is. We're not inside the four walls to know if anyone is more the problem than someone else. But when you look at improvement for list-wise, you're always trying to bring someone in. I feel like that's potentially the same for the coaching ranks. Do we need someone who is more of that senior mold to help a guy like Michael Voss and help with this tactic side that we aren't getting right and haven't really got right for the last 3 years? So I guess I would be surprised that across not only just coaches, but all of administration, the only area we've looked to improve has just been the fitness staff. Russell's out. Rob Innes is in. Felt like there'd be more considering the bad end to the season and just needing to continue to evolve.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it'll probably lead into potentially the next topic that we talk about in this regard, but it's that question about what things look like in a year, I think, at the club as well. And, if you mess with too much stability things now, and potentially then it happens a year later. So if this period comes and goes and we don't see really any changes in that way, I'm not going to be concerned this year.
Yeah, so that leads to the next question around probably it's Brad Lloyd is the big topic. He's the one that everyone always goes to, really, because he's been there for a long period of time. And any time someone is in a role for many, many years and they haven't got the success and all the moving pieces below them keep shifting and keep changing, you have to ask the question, well, if you keep getting the decisions wrong and we have to keep changing it, are you the right person? And so I guess, given all our assistant coaches are seemingly contracted as well, which is maybe why we haven't seen any movement. Those the murmurs going around, that meaning there's less room for being maneuverable in the offseason. Normally you'd want at least one of them to be out of contract so you can potentially move them on. We've had that. We've had the complete disaster of the fitness program, and we're at least attempting to fix that at the moment. In 12 months' time, in a year, we are going to have big upheaval in the administration side of the club. We're going to definitely have a new president. Luke Sayers cannot stay on any longer due to the constitution that we have. And then it looks like it will be Brian Cook's last year as the CEO. They are two of the biggest positions at the club that will be moving on. I guess the question is, should we be looking to do it all in one foul swoop at the end of next year if we do move on a guy like Brad Lloyd, or should you be doing it now so it's maybe not as big a change next year if it is to be believed that this guy maybe isn't up to task?
Oh, God, I really see it both ways, right? Exactly how you just laid it out. Part of me thinks that, maybe this is the right thing to move on now, because changing these three roles in a year's time, for example, like that does, to me, feel like it would be a lot of change. But then maybe that is a good thing to be doing at the same time. So I struggle to be opinionated either way.
Because I guess the other side of it is what we just touched on as well is it simply better to shift all the positions at once, particularly if we make the move this year, move on Brad Lloyd, bring in someone else, then all of a sudden the big decision makers are new next year. They might not even like the new hire and go, well, why did we just hire X guy into a position for 4 years when the new leaders don't like him? So maybe that is the only reason, if they do want to move him on, that he stays there. And I'm speculating on this point. Maybe Brad Lloyd's the best, head of football there possibly could be. But my issue is he seems to always escape a bit of that responsibility within the football department, that he's meant to be in charge of everything. Everything falls under his leadership. And when there's team selection issues, when there's player management of fitness issues, and he's meant to be across this, he's meant to be the one kind of dealing with these hiring and firings. When the results don't go our way and everyone else gets the blame and not him, that's where I start to put the magnifying glass on him and say, well, hang on a minute. Is this guy right for the role as well? I don't know. I'm, again, just speculating on it, but I'm surprised he kind of has lasted this long when we probably haven't seen the success we've all wanted. And there's been problems within his departments.
Yeah, it's fair. I think there's been a number of off seasons on this podcast where we've kind of speculated on this point and thought we wouldn't be surprised if there was change. So, once again, it's kind of the same.
Yeah. I know you don't have the strongest opinions on the administrative side of things, simply because we're not inside the four walls, so it is hard to comment. But everyone's been wanting really ruthless moves this offseason. We don't want to stagnate. We had a bad end to what looked like a really strong year. That doesn't mean we're going to just tail off and that's the best we'll ever see. But there is a chance that could happen. We didn't think that in 2011, 2012, that would be the best that we'd see of Carlton for another 10 years. We thought that group was going to continue. So it could fall at any stage. Would you be wanting us to be making these bold moves? Would that fill you with more excitement for the season, that the club is really strong-willed if they had moved on a guy like Brad Lloyd, or maybe an assistant coach that they potentially thought really highly of, or you thought highly of? They went, no, he's out, we're bringing in someone else. Are those kind of ruthless moves that, when announced, get you excited? Or is that something that you don't really look at when you're wanting a more ruthless, go for the flag approach?
I think if I'm being very reflective on myself, I always like new things when it comes to Carlton. Any recruit that we get, any new person coming into the club, I'll find a way to look at that in a positive light, because that's what we want to do as fans and to be on board with the moves that they're making. But I also think I'm probably more on the if there's a spectrum of like where we see the next couple of years going, I feel like I'm more optimistic and positive than most. So the really bold changes for me probably aren't the things that I need to get excited about next season. I already think we're going to have a great year, even if we just run it back pretty similar to how we're set up now.
No, I absolutely love it. And that goes to the last thing before we go into all talking about the list and the trades, who's coming in, who is departing the club. It kind of ties in well with a big theme of what's maybe not going right and what needs to improve for us to simply just win a few more games next season. It's injuries. And the back end of last year, we obviously get to a prelim. Things are looking good. We have a lot of injury-prone players, but we run it back one more year with the likes of Marchbank, Cunningham, Jack Martin, because they were fit at the end of the season. Things were looking good. Thought we got the best out of them. Now, this year, a few of those obviously are departing, but it feels like, there's the talk of Kennedy, Always and Young looking to get moved on. They're guys that have stayed pretty durable. They've been fit and available for most of the time, whereas the guys that are maybe ahead of them, you look at Gov, Haynes, Durden, Chera Walsh in the midfield, forward line of Williams, Fantasia, Motlop, Durden, maybe not as reliable, haven't been able to get on the park as much compared to those guys. Do you think that we're again banking on too many injury-prone players or too many unproven players to stay fit and really just have that level of improvement heading into 2025?
I'm not really feeling that. No, I think it's interesting thinking about some of those outgoing players that have been, or potentially outgoing players that have been relatively fit. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to remain that way. Like there's plenty of players that you look at and go, wow, how incredibly healthy were they? And then suddenly they're injury prone within a year or two. But I feel like the names that you led off with, like the guys that have already been delisted, they're the culprits where it's like, we literally cannot expect you at any given week to be fit. I can't really think of anyone like that kind of remains.
Yeah, there's definitely, Gov has a few issues. Sard, Chera at the moment is a big one. Williams is
but
up
they're
and
not guys
down.
that run out on the field and you're like, oh, they could get injured at any moment, which is what it was kind of like with those three, I felt.
Yeah, they're also, I would like to add, guys that I wouldn't be looking to move on at all. They are well and truly contracted, would not want to get rid of them, probably because they're able to stay a little bit more fit and the output has definitely been there. You look at a guy like David Cunningham, it was always, if this guy can stay fit, look what we've got. Not only did he never stay fit, but even the performances on field weren't necessarily glowing. We were just hoping it would come good like a Marchbank. So I think to a degree, we're probably banking on a little bit to go right for us. But I think that's everyone. And I think that's every list in the AFL. You need the luck. Important. You need to stay fit. You need players to take the step. It's probably about what we're replacing and how we replace it rather than just sticking with what we've got that I'm going to put my focus towards. So let's take a look at the outgoings. Right. To recap, we have delisted Caleb Marchbank, David Cunningham, Jack Martin, Big Dom, and Alex Murkov there. All pretty straightforward. We've discussed them at length. However, there's been a bit of movement on one of them right now in Jack Martin. He's basically going to Geelong, which when you hear he's maybe going to a Freo or someone like that, you kind of sit back and think, we got not a lot out of Jack Martin. We thought we'd do a little bit better. We'll see what happens. Geelong starts sniffing around. All of a sudden, he's going there. it starts to fill you with a little bit of dread of what are we potentially missing out on? Why is a team like Geelong sniffing around? So I guess there's a few questions on this that everyone's been talking about on the old socials. So should we be worried, Lockie, that we have gotten rid of Jack Martin? Is this a mistake?
It's a beautiful look into the footy fan psyche, I think. I won't speak for people like what they were thinking before this Geelong news came up, but for me, I was certain that I didn't think that he should be on our list next year. When I have that opinion, I don't think I can then also have the opinion that, then be concerned about what he could get out of him at other clubs, because there was just no confidence in me that we were going to get what we want from him staying on our list. So, but obviously, like you said, it does fill you with a weird feeling inside where it's like, oh, we're going to have to be watching him kick 4 on us or something.
I think the follow-up is, are you annoyed or frustrated that a team like Geelong see Jack Martin and go, we can fix him, he's fine, and that we as Carlton supporters didn't have the confidence that we could get Jack Martin right, and you see a team like Geelong with so much success, were meant to sort of start to drop down the ladder, almost made a grand final. They're going to be bringing in, Bailey Smith and potentially could have been Clayton Oliver. Who knows what is happening with that situation. But then they look to bring in a guy like Jack Martin. They believe they can get him right. Does that fill you with a bit of dread that more looking at it a Carlton side than what they could potentially do in why are we not able to look at these injury-prone players and think that we can fix them?
Well, it's a little Fantasia-esque to me, I would have thought. Kind of similar in that regard.
I guess a little bit. I mean, I guess Fantasia in his last year at Port at least played the back end of the season similar to a Jack Martin. So there is, I guess, something in that. So you're not that worried. Is that because we're getting a new fitness team and you're just willing to back in the new guy and hope that the problems will be solved that way?
I don't know. There's so many ways that you can look at the injury situation over the years and where you want to point the fingers, and you can't, for me, completely put it on staff. Like who knows what Martin was kind of like, I guess, through this whole process and that kind of thing. So I can't be just like, you can't just say, well, a better fitness team will just get Jack Martin playing to his absolute best.
No, I mean, I agree with you. Gold Coast couldn't get it done. We couldn't get it done. When he's fit and playing, he's unbelievable. You just can't seem to do it for long enough. And I guess my answer on this, because I sort of threw you into the hot seat without ever answering it myself, which I don't know if I've gotten away with, whether you noticed that. But look, should we have kept him if a team like Geelong are interested? Maybe. But I think Geelong are at the point with their list, when you look at it, that they can take a punt on an injury-prone player with upside for not having to pay him a lot of money. I think when you look at our list and where we sit, we probably can't do that. And, I mean, the time had come with a guy like Jack Martin, just the mental side of it for him, mental side of it for the supporters. One more time you see that man injured and you're like, I've just had enough. I can't deal with going through this again. I'm not sure it's worth it. And should we maybe have gotten something more for him rather than just delisting him again? Probably. But it really looked like all the other teams were saying, look, we're just not going to offer you anything. This guy, we don't know if he can play any football at all. There's no value. He's out of contract. You're not going to keep him. So no. And at stages when you are a football club, unfortunately, in the AFL, you've kind of got to be nice. You have to treat your players well, because even on the out, when you are moving a player on, if you do it in a good way, that goes positively for player managers. That goes positively for other players in the competition that say, hey, if things don't go right, at least I'm treated well. To give them I do this a lot to this football club, but they've done it again to themselves in a St. Kilda with, battle and the way that all kind of happens at the best and fairest. And you just think, that's probably why you guys maybe haven't had that success. And that's rich coming from us who haven't had it either. But you need to build that culture. And I think us treating Jack Martin with a little bit of respect on the way out is probably what it is at the end of the day. The only thing on Jack Martin that maybe frustrates, the only thing that probably frustrates me on Jack Martin is when you hear, 2023, he was receiving all that treatment outside the club, finally gets the body right, seemingly in our lead up to playing finals for the first time in 10 years. And then in 2024, it's been reported that we brought all the treatment back in-house. Jack Russell and co were then controlling a lot more of it. In the end, you can't just say that that's the causation with it, but he only ends up playing 3 games. Do you think we should be annoyed at the potential mismanagement in they tried something, we got results, why then completely change it and it seemingly not get results?
Wow. God. Well, I feel like we're delving into complicated issues. I think... No, I'm not going to be annoyed at that because there's just way too many factors to understand the nuances around that for me.
Yeah.
Like if I don't know, he plays the most games. I know this is like how long's a string or whatever. But if he somehow played the most games this year, then we're applauding something that we just don't really understand.
Yeah. No, I agree with you, and I like having this discussion with you because I tend to get fired up about it, and you bring me back to a bit more reality sense, which is, I think, why it works so well. I'm still going to be annoyed, though, in how my mind works from the outside is if you've tried something and it's worked, why change it? Particularly in the body sense of things. No one's got the best out of Jack Martin. It felt like he was finally there. Feels odd to go away from what was seemingly working. That's my perspective. But again, it could well and truly be like you're suggesting. Maybe that wasn't exactly why it was working. It could have been another factor that was the reason it was working. And maybe they were doing something that our medical team said, I don't like him doing that. It has to be in-house. We have to make sure that he's our investment. We can't be letting someone outside this club be, experimenting on our players. We need to know exactly what's going on because if they break down, it's kind of on us. And maybe that was simply the approach.
I'm looking at the games now from 2023. So obviously he missed 12 weeks to start the season. And then he came back, like you said. Played 2 weeks, we had a bye. Played 3 weeks, then he missed a game. Not sure why that was. And then he played 5 in a row, and then he had the suspension and 1 more game. That is such a small sample size of what we're talking about here with him.
No.
Like, I can't draw anything from that.
No, absolutely love it. So let's talk about the trades, Lockie. Let's talk about the list. There are a few players potentially going away from the football club, whether that be trade or delisting. And I want to know from you guys, watching and listening this, your thoughts on all of them. What are they worth? Do you think they'll go? Do you want them to stay? And what deal are you accepting for them? Let's go through the first one. Matt Owies, out of contract as things stand. Lockie, what is his value if you were Nick Austin? Put your Nick Austin hat on. What are you accepting for Matt Owies?
Well, maybe you can clarify the situation for me. With someone that is out of contract like him, how would that negotiation even work?
In what capacity?
As in, like, is the leverage situation different to, say, a Kennedy, someone that's got another year on his contract?
Oh, definitely. As soon as anyone's contracted, you can just hold them to the contract. When they're out, you can still weirdly hold them to it because if they're not a free agent, they can't just leave. Weirdly, if you don't have a contract to a club, but you're not a free agent, you're just in limbo. And it's the old threaten to walk them to the preseason draft. So the team would have to have a pick before us in that draft to then get him. So there's not, I guess, a lot of leverage for us to be asking for a great deal. My pondering around this is probably the club have been adamant with him and I guess Kennedy that, look, we're pretty happy to keep them as well. We're floating to see if we can get value. Otherwise, maybe they will stay. So I guess the question I'll ask off the back of that is, what would you be willing to part with if you had the ability to definitely just recontract them straight away?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's so hard to think about how we value players compared to how they are out of the club, right?
Agreed.
Like,
we also haven't
and then
played him, so from a buying club, sorry, we've played him, but we've kind of said you're not required. So there's all the leverage again. There's the power in that trade gone. It makes it a lot more difficult for us to demand anything really high.
I know. I feel like any kind of area that I put out there is just going to be overs. Like something in the 30s, that feels like too much for someone that we're basically saying we would be happy. We're fine with not having them on the list, right?
Yeah.
But then, do you care about a pick in the 40s for him? You would just rather keep him, right?
It's tricky, isn't it? So I guess I think he's probably market value. Look, he's kicked some goals. That is what he has done in the last couple of seasons. And there's not a great deal of small forwards in the competition that have had his kind of return. I would say he's probably around third round pick, I would say, is his value. Does that drop even more because he's out of contract, because we've showed our hand a little bit? Potentially. So I wanted to take a look at the clubs potentially interested in him, even though there's articles coming out saying nobody wants him. Tom Morris said that there's not a lot of interest from other clubs at this stage, but Brisbane's one that has been linked. They have Ashcroft that they're getting as a father-son, Marshall as an academy pick in this year's draft. So anything that they'd be wanting to give us, probably going to be a future pick. And on top of this, right now, we don't necessarily want picks coming back our way in the 2024 draft that fall after pick 30-ish, because that's when you're almost expecting a bid for the Camperelli, at least Ben, at this stage. So those picks are just going to get swallowed up in a match bid, which we kind of probably have those points already. So you're probably wanting those future picks. So maybe that works for Brisbane. Where is it a future third? Does that get it over the line? Can you maybe somehow squeeze a late second rounder and throw something back their way to get those deals happening? Potentially, because Brisbane, again, next year have a lot of academy players coming through that are going to be high draft picks. So is this the best time to strike now when Brisbane don't really need that value? Potentially. Gold Coast at the moment this year have a third round pick, 49, but again, they've got academy player Leo Lombard in this year's draft, so probably a future there. Melbourne have a third round pick of 48 and another as 53. That's probably his value, but do we need that pick this year? Probably not. Last one being West Coast. Don't have anything. They have a fourth round pick, 62, which what's the point? So most likely a future pick. Seeing who's interested, do you have a team that you think that he fits if he were to move more than another, and what deal you'd prefer if you were getting a future pick from any of those clubs?
Well, I mean, watching Brisbane win the grand final, you struggle to see where he kind of slots into that forward line with injured players coming back as well. God, can you imagine Matt Owies in a Gold Coast jersey? That just feels wrong.
It doesn't look right, does it?
I'll say Melbourne. Why not?
Yeah, I feel like he fits Melbourne's list more at the moment. Maybe West Coast, simply because they need players. Let's be honest. Anyone that can kind of play AFL football, they need. But would you even want to go over West? It's a big question mark. So we know the value probably isn't there for him. If you're able to get a third round pick, a future third, Lockie, are we trading Matt Owies or are we re-signing him?
Yeah, I think. I think if that was off from the table, I think that will do it.
Okay, so we are marking that down right now as he's a trade for a future third round pick. We'll come back to this. We're going to do the whole ins and outs. I agree. I think we're banking in Zach Williams to take his role and Motlop and who knows, maybe even a draftee to flood that forward line. Next one, the big one, Matt Kennedy. What is his value? Now, he is contracted, so there's a bit more to this. If you're Nick Austin and you've floated him out there, but you've said he can stay. It's all just to do with him wanting more midfield minutes. We can't necessarily say that he's going to play more mid, but we're happy to keep him. An offer comes across your table. What is it going to take for you to depart with Matt Kennedy?
The thing that I should have done in leading up to this is look at precedent for other trades like this in previous years, and I'm guessing you haven't done that for me.
Absolutely
Why
not.
would you? It's so hard when it's a play like these guys. They're just not part of the future for us, and it's so clear that we feel that way. So it makes me wonder how other clubs look at this situation. Like, surely they're looking at this and lowballing the hell out of Nick Austin in situations like this. I would think that he's worth more than Owies would be.
What would you like? Let's forget everything else of more situation value, but what would you say his value is as a player? Forget the contract or us not playing him. What is his peak value at his best?
In terms of a draft pick?
Yes.
Oh, it's such apples and oranges to me to be comparing those. Like, if you think about players that we have drafted in the 30s and how many of them come through and deliver really well. Like, I'm thinking the year like the Carroll and Durden draft of guys in the 30s, for example. Like, we've got so much more out of Kennedy than I think we will from either of those, right?
That's true. So you're just keeping him? You don't think... Are you wanting an early second round pick? Is that kind of what you would be wanting, but you don't think he's obviously worth that? No one would pay it.
Sure. I think that's probably a good way to put it. I think there's such a disparity between when there's a mature S-ish player on the list compared to what we can get from them in the market. But having said that, I don't think that we should keep him.
Yes. Okay. So let me float a few things and get your opinion off this. So the teams, I guess, that are somewhat linked, or at least I think fit their team. I'll start with St Kilda. I think they need clearly some more help in that engine room. And look, we know Sauce, he loves his former players. And so it kind of makes sense to go to St Kilda. I'd say his value at best is, late second, probably early third. He's an inside midfielder. These are easy-ish players to get. The value on them is not high. So while I guess that return value, just looking at the draft pick, is there, you also have to remember we're tight on list spot. So we're getting list spot and we're getting salary back. So there is a bit more to it than just, okay, we've got a kind of crappy draft pick. There's more opportunity cost to this as well. Maybe we get another player in. Maybe this allows a bit of that money to get moved around to bring in a Dan Houston type player. So I think looking at what St Kilda have for this year, their second round pick is 27. Their third round pick is 46. Melbourne, I think they need some more midfield help with who knows what's going to happen with Petrarca, Clayton Oliver, another, you don't know what's happening. Second round pick is 40. Third round is 48. So probably a bit of a tighter between those two. North Melbourne, well, they're getting Luke Parker, so maybe this rules him out. But again, do they want someone who is a bit more mature to allow their youngsters developing? They have a second at 25, which is probably too high. Third is 43. Maybe it's a future. Instead, Collingwood, do they want to add to their midfield? Second round pick 36. Third round is 51. And then Geelong is the other, who potentially do they want to just keep adding to their midfielders? Parfitt is a guy who is moving on for them if they can't get Clayton Oliver. Is the mold of a Matt Kennedy really exciting for them? They have a second round pick 38, third round pick 56. Because they're kind of focused on maybe using those to get Smith and potentially Oliver across the line, probably a future makes more sense. Do you think any of those teams make sense for Matt Kennedy? And would you be looking to move him on for a future pick? Or can you maybe get that pick 27 from the Saints if we give up something extra? Is that where you're maybe moving towards? If you're not getting the value you think a Matt Kennedy is worth, can you bring that value in by offering more than Matt Kennedy?
Yeah, I mean, I like that strategy for sure. But I think you said it well. I think you have to take in the circumstances around this to talk about it properly. Because if we didn't have a shortage of list spots with all the things that we want to do right now, I'd be so much more open to this. Like, obviously, I'm happy for him to be on our list, but it's opportunity cost of him being there. So, yeah, but I mean, the St Kilda one makes sense. Like that in my mind, I can see the reasons why that would happen and where he would fit in there. So, for this, again, with this one, I feel like there's just too much smoke, and I think it's going to happen.
Really? See, I feel like I'm in the camp at the moment. I think he's just going to stay because no one's really coming out and saying they want Matt Kennedy. Same with Owies. And maybe this is...
Well...
Because I know a lot of fans are annoyed that we're looking to get rid of these guys. But it's the argument of if no one's really going hard for them, does that just show you that they're not valued and that maybe it's fine to let these guys depart if... I mean, look at so many of the guys that have been linked to this offseason. You see so many clubs either immediately, yes, this is the club he's going to, or here's 10 clubs that are trying to go after him. At the moment, those two are so loosely based with everyone. Does that mean that it is fine if we let them go?
But the period hasn't even opened yet. So I'm not buying into that yet. Just because... Yeah, just because no clubs have come hard or have tried to leak things out there about it. Yeah. And then you make an interesting point about, and I felt you alluded with this, with the Martin thing as well. So it sounds like to me, you do value how other clubs perceive our players. That changes how you would view them. E.g., if Geelong think that they can get something out of Martin, then that makes you a little, like you get worried about that. Or if 5 clubs all say they want Kennedy, does that make you more likely to be like, oh, well, I want to keep it then?
It is a little bit of the kid who doesn't want the toy and all of a sudden someone picks it up and he goes, hey, that's mine. Give that back. I was playing with that. Which maybe was me as a kid. I'll have to find out. But it probably gives a little bit of value in the sense that I just don't fully 100% trust our decision-making until we really prove it. And as much as I want to believe that we make the right calls and that getting rid of these players is the right decision, when you see those really elite clubs that have success want your player, it does leave that thought in the back of your mind of, am I missing something? Are we just not smart here? Normal. But I guess when I'm looking specifically at Owies and Kennedy, they're just not positions that I think if they leaves us short. You know, Matt Kennedy, inside midfielder, we've probably got too many. We need something else. Now, he's always better than some of the other small forwards. Yes, but he's out of contract, which means if you need to move one because you've got too many, unfortunately, he leaves. And so that's probably where I see it with those two. I won't be that fussed. If either leave, if they stay, you beauty. I'll be happy with that too. So final verdict on Matt Kennedy. Are you trading him? And what roughly do you think we'd get back?
I took the first one. So if you think that we will keep him, then I'll take your word.
I think he's going to stay. Is my gut feel?
Yeah,
but
it's just a gut feel for me too.
Yeah, I just don't think he's someone we're going to on market get the value we think he's worth. And I believe that's the reason he'll stay. And it just what makes it so tricky is what we're getting back. Cool. We get pick, I don't know, 36 from Collingwood, let's just say. Actually, let's not say that because I hate Collingwood. We get pick 38 from Geelong. Yeah, great. Yes. We don't need pick 38 unless the move is get a few of these picks and trade up for a different pick. Now, that maybe is a little bit juicy. But Matt Kennedy for a pick that becomes Ben Camporelli that we're getting anyway, it's just kind of what's the point? So is getting future picks the right move when next year's draft isn't amazing anyway? I don't know. So I guess at this stage, I'll say he stays. Jack Carroll. Another bit of midfield depth. We're not exactly sure what Jack Carroll is. The most starting sub this year, so got a bit of versatility to him. What's his value? And is he going? Because he's out of contract at the moment.
Yeah, so I mean, he was around pick 39, 40, if I remember correctly. And I would think that his value would have to be less than that now, based on what his output's been.
Yeah, I'd say he's just pretty much a 3rd, 4th round pick, just list spot rather than value. And West Coast really the only team that seem to be somewhat linked just because he's from WA and Freo don't really need him. West Coast need, again, as many players as they kind of can get that can kick a football. He's one of those. That makes sense. When I'm looking at what West Coast have, at least for this year, they've got no picks. It'll be a 4th rounder, which is pick 62. Maybe if we're really short on points or something, you need like a couple. But I'd say it's most likely a future 3rd or 4th for Jack Carroll in the end. Do you think that's worth it? Should we just keep him? Or does it come down to whether we need that last list spot for you?
It's so much about that. It's so much about that. If you find out that, whatever that opportunity cost is of the player that we can't get in because of him. And it's a weird one for me to try and guess as well, because it's not like he didn't play at all, but we did have a lot of injuries. But he was also the sub so often. My gut feel is that he'll go.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's probably that list spot that will just end up getting a future whatever. And look, that's good enough at this stage. Lewis Young, contracted.
Yeah.
But name's been floated about. And both of us said in the list analysis, it's a bit weird because we don't have a lot of actual tall key defenders. We've got a lot of interceptors. We've brought in Nick Haynes, another interceptor. We know his ability isn't necessarily amazing, but we've already moved on Marchbank. Feels like Haynes for Marchbank is the move. You probably would keep Lewis Young over Sam Durden because at least he's fit. Does it come down to the money that Lewis Young is on compared to a Sam Durden? Where do you see the Lewis Young trade?
It was interesting in Austin's little chat that he did yesterday. He literally called Marchie out, essentially saying that, Haynes for him is what they've done there. My gut feel on this one is that Young will stay. Out of these guys that we're looking at, you just can't imagine that the coin would be that much, would it? Or you think based on what we saw early days,
it's not that I think the coin's a lot, but it's more worth. He would have signed a contract worth more than what he's playing at the moment. Because when he signed it, he was in our best 22. All of a sudden, he's behind McGovern, behind Kemp, behind Haynes, potentially even behind a draftee we bring in. So if Lewis the Young is on your list right now, you'd be wanting to probably make him like a Cat A rookie or something like that. So the teams that are linked at the moment, it's really no one. It's links that I think fans have kind of made. It's West Coast because Barras is leaving. So do they need just an established player? Again, they've only got a 4th round pick at 62, so it'll probably be a future. North Melbourne because do they just need a bit more seniority down there? Someone that can play. They've got a 3rd, which is 43, a 4th at 61. Again, probably futures then. Is that really worth the list spot for you?
Yeah, I don't think it is.
Yeah, neither do I. Unless, again, there's this world where the picks that we're getting for Owies, Kennedy, Carroll, and Young, we're able to somehow combine them all to move up the draft board or use them to bring in someone else. Just doesn't make sense to me to stockpile all these picks because I don't think we need that many list spots, but maybe we will when we get down to the end. So, yeah, I agree with you. At the moment, Lewis Young is a keep. And then the last one, it's not a trade, but it's a keep or delist. It's Sam Durden.
Yeah. As much as it is a key position guy, I think he would be a delist for mine.
Yeah. I think if you're keeping one, so that would mean that Sam Durden is gone. He is delisted. So let's go to the list needs. We've sorted out who's leaving the club. Let's see what we need now. To recap them, we kind of came up with looking at the depth chart, looking at the best 22 from there. You can watch the list analysis episode to keep up to date to it all, get the true details of that. But we came up with key defender to support Wiedering. We need that number 2.
Yep.
We need a dynamic midfielder, mid-forward, just a point of difference around the stoppages. We probably need another small forward as far as not just another one to add to the long list of guys we have, but if we're bringing someone in, they need to be better than what we have because it's a weakness on our list that the caliber of player isn't good enough. And then I'd say to a lesser extent, there's some key forward depth because it's Harry Lemmy and that's kind of it. Maybe Jack Silvani, or you're throwing Kemp or McGovern into it. And then while we've got a lot of players off the half back, if we can get some speed into that, some run and carry of what maybe Sard and Williams were meant to be that we probably haven't seen enough of, add a bit of zip to that back line and a bit of ball use, probably what we want. So, Lockie, when looking at players to come into the club, now we've been linked to two, really, and that's it. We've been linked to Dan Houston and a little bit of Sam De Koning that has seemingly been said it's not happening. When you're seeing our list needs, any names come to mind of players that you want us to target, whether they're available or whether you'd be getting in their ear to get them available or another club is after them? Have you done any little bit of research into players that you'd say, okay, this is the player I would like to come to?
Wow. A real typewriter job. No, I really haven't. I think just to touch on the needs of what you said then, like the small forward one, I really still believe that can be in the lesser extent category. If we just get what we want from Williams and if Motlop can take the step forward and be healthy, with Durds as kind of being the backup, I'm happy with that. So it really is that the key defender in our best 22, I think, is glaring. And Austin said we're looking to bring in speed and we're looking to bring in run, which are very different things. Give me the names that you've got. You love doing this shit.
Well, okay, let's start at the key defense. I've got a few. They're not glamorous because let's be honest right now. I've got a big master list spreadsheet of every single player that has been linked with a move this offseason because I'm a nuffy and I want to keep up with it and see what's happening. And it's color-coded. We've got deals that are done. We've got requested. We've got likely, rumored, available, other names that might happen. And then I've got unlikely. Everything is going on. And I'll be honest, Lockie, there's not a lot of great names in the key defensive slot, but one that has at least been linked. Let's talk about it. Sam De Koning. Everyone got excited about this. It got absolutely quashed before anyone could even get excited about it. The big talk on Dan Houston is he's not worth 2 first-round picks. Is Sam De Koning worth 2 first-round picks for you? Because I chucked the poll out on Twitter, on X, to see what the listeners thought about this. But I want to know for you, the peak, get rid of all your picks for it. Is he the guy that you'd sell the farm for?
Wow. God, it's so hard for me to separate output and emotion here. Because fuck me, was I excited when I saw that rumor. And just all the different things all the narratives and things that went through my mind. My God, so young, like obviously has shown a lot when healthy. Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. Look, the people agree with you. 56.9% said yes. 43.1% said no. Pretty much everyone said, I want him. But look, 2 first is probably a bit much. I agree. I think 2 first is too much for one reason. He's out of contract next year. And where I look at it, list manager hat on, I'm just not willing to sell the farm for a guy I can potentially get for cheaper next year. Geelong would want 2 firsts. And I guess this whole debate, because I've had so many people on Twitter, I mean, the Port Nuffies have come for me, which has been fun to just see the responses and just walk away because you just can't deal with them. But I think everyone needs to, when looking at trade period, because it's just everyone comes out at this stage, you've got to separate 2 things. What the selling club value this player, what the buying club value. And if they disagree, that's fine. In this sense, Geelong had on young, 204 centimetre player that's shown enough, has won a premiership, probably the future when you look at some of their aging players in the back line. Look, had the injury,
Absolutely.
couldn't get back into the team because they went with those that had that continuity that they maybe trusted at this stage, had a couple of head knocks. Okay, he's not best 22 right now, but probably is going forward. I've got a year to at least convince him if he is a little bit disenfranchised. I'm going to be asking for 2 firsts at least. Fair enough. As a buying club, no, sorry. 2 firsts is too much. I can get him for less next year. I'd say a first and maybe a second is probably where I would value him at fairly and what I'd be willing to give up right now. Now, doesn't look like the deal will happen. I wish that you were maybe getting into his ear a little bit more and saying, kick up a stink. Say you're definitely leaving, make it a little bit untenable, and we'll get the deal to happen. Doesn't feel like that happens a lot for Carlton, where it maybe happens for other clubs. Feels like the players always, I'm happy to stay though, but I mean, if I can get to Carlton, no, I want someone to demand that, no, it's Carlton or nothing at this stage. But he definitely fits a need. There just would be some concerns around the concussion, and Geelong don't let a lot of good players go. So if they were potentially entertaining it, does that worry you at all?
Well, I would challenge one of the things that you said, that we would get him for less next year in a year's time.
Yeah.
Because if Geelong's medical department is apparently also good, and now he has his best season and plays every game next year, and now every club is coming for him, I think we'd be sitting here saying, fuck, why didn't we just, like, let's say that they would have accepted 2 firsts this year, for example, and we didn't because we had that mindset.
I guess I don't see any player out of contract worth 2 first rounders, and I don't think any club would pay it, which is probably my perspective on it. And if someone wants to, go ahead, you can have him. I think that's just way overs for an out-of-contract player.
Yeah, but for a 23-year-old that we would love to get like their best 8 years of their career out of, I just wonder if we're confident in him and that he'll, he's going to be an amazing player at Geelong if the opportunity was there, which I don't think it really is right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just think I'm skeptical on paying the farm for anyone, and that right now we don't have a lot of youth coming through our lineup, and we need to kind of attack the draft. So if we don't take anyone with a first round pick in the next 2 years, but we've got to Koning, is he the player to do that for? Maybe he'd be closer to it, being a young key defender. I think the only thing that worries me is the concussions. And is that an issue? He's had a couple now, and then just being out of contract, I think you're paying overs. And I guess where I am looking as a list manager, I never want to pay overs for a player unless we're one player away from winning a flag. When I look at some of those, and I guess you look at Geelong and you say, Jeremy Cameron, they need one key forward to win them a flag kind of deal. I still think we have a few other issues. And it's not just that. If the only issue we had was key defender, then I'd say, give the 2 draft picks. But just think it's slightly overs. And in a year's time, I think you can get the deal done for better. And you got a whole year to just plant the seeds and say, look, who cares? Even if they play you every single game, they didn't think you were good enough last year. So who knows, anything could happen. Maybe by the end of the year, will they drop you for the grand final again? Who knows? They don't trust you, mate.
Maybe.
They played Blitzarves over you. He's 100 years old.
Yeah. I definitely see your point of view on it.
Yeah. But he's the kind of player we need. Another one who won't be gettable.
No doubt.
I just want to float this for the reason of, if we give away all these future picks, this guy's out of contract next year, and he's someone that you could potentially also sell the farm for out of contract. It's Leclerc. He could be an absolute superstar. Everyone will be clamoring for him. GWS have already re-signed their 3 key defenders. So where does he fit into their lineup? I have no idea. And I would almost put the house on him being traded at the end of next season. Hopefully it's to us. He's someone I'd be earmarking. Obviously we can't get him this year, but does that knowing De Koning and Alira out of contract next year, does that change your opinion on us moving on future picks to make other deals happen this year?
Oh, wow. Very interesting. It would change my mindset if we had any more kind of certainty that there was like linkage for next year. I think that would change my perspective on this, because far out would be absolutely stoked to have either of those guys on our list. But if we, you don't make those moves and then these things don't work out, which they very well could, then we're stuffed.
I guess this is where I agree with that sentimentality and opinion completely. It's probably where you just got to back in the list management team to, if we've traded away the future draft pick, find a way to make that deal happen, because you have to, whether that's trading someone else or doing anything. But I agree, it's something to kind of keep in mind. But really, are any of these key defenders at least better than what we have if we're looking to move on Durden and Lewis Young?
Okay.
I'm going to throw out some names for you. Unrestricted free agent Adam Tomlinson, 31 years old. A few clubs after him. You've got Sam Frost from Hawthorn, 194 centimeters, contracted, but looks like because they've brought in so many, he is gettable. And then the last two are way less exciting. It's Denver, Granger, Barras, who again, same thing at Hawthorn. He's out of contract, so you'd almost be delisted potentially by the end of the season. 195 centimeters. And then Aaron Francis, 193 centimeters, out of contract, probably going to be delisted by Sydney. Any of those at all make you say, well, we'll bring them in and get rid of Young and Durden?
No. For me, I'd rather just persist with Young in the team if it was any of those names.
I think Tomlinson's probably the only one I'd say
really?
I prefer. But then you look at it and say, well, he's 31 years old. So what are you really getting out of him? I thought this year he was probably his best year he's shown for a long time. But again, none of these names are sexy. They're not exciting. If anyone can find another one, let me know. But yeah, I mean, if you have an extra list spot, the only one I'd maybe throw a dart at is Granger Barras, but we don't have that flexibility to just say, hey, last spot on the list, let's rookie list you if you get delisted and see what happens. So where does that leave us? We've brought in Nick Haynes, and we'll chat about him in a second. What are you doing with this last spot? It's a clear list need, that key defender. Or do you think McGovern and Haynes and Kemp can play that role? Where do you see those key defensive stocks?
It's a really tricky one. The best circumstance in my mind is obviously to have a best 22, more locked down key defender, free-weedering up more, do what, like, he does everything well, but being able to be a little freer and potentially not to take the best guy feels like the recipe for success. But yeah, it's seeming unlikely to do that, right? We don't know what Kemp looks like next year, or we don't know what the club are thinking about with Kemp, with him being thrown around. Like you said, Gov's getting older. Any day you feel like Gov could go down and miss a bunch of time. So yeah, I don't have a good answer for this one.
No, me either. And that's almost the issue this is probably our biggest list need. And there doesn't seem to be any obvious solution. Nick Haynes, fine inclusion for nothing that replaces Marchbank. Absolutely. That's a fine arrangement, but I think we need more. But where do you find it? And so did we need to get more creative? Did we really need to go after De Koning and Alir and turn them and make sure they were coming to us like other teams seem to be able to do? Maybe they're just simply confident with what they have. It'll be interesting in a space to watch. Mid-forward, Lockie, there's really no one available. It'd be Petrarca. Clearly, that's not happening. We wouldn't have had the salary and capital to get it done anyway. So I guess you just kind of have to move on from that unless someone can suggest a name that's the perfect player. I don't see anything happening in that space, Lockie.
I know. I feel the same way. Yeah,
Might be one potentially for the draft instead. Halfback. Yep. This is where we've been linked. Dan Houston. We've spoken about him a little bit. Let's dive into it as much as possible.
Go on.
Contracted till 2027. Port are laughing at Carlton's offers. They're angry. They're throwing the phone.
Furious.
They're having a tantrum. They're in the fetal position crying at what Carlton's offering. They can't believe the unders. They're not even willing to talk to Nick Austin. They've thrown the bloody dummy out that much. They've cracked the shits. And they're like, no, we're not talking to him. That's it, Lockie. How dare you offer only a first-round pick for our boy, Dan Houston, which is just baffling. My one question, before we get into the value, before we get into our opinions on Dan Houston,
yes,
should we be comparing and holding on to the baggage of Zach Williams, maybe not working out in that halfback, on the decent coin, the Sard move that has been good, but we probably haven't had the perfect, I guess, trade when you're talking about giving up a high draft pick when we're discussing this Houston trade, because I feel like that's where a lot of Carlton supporters are going, don't want to overpay for a halfback flanker. We've been burnt before. Or should we be using that as evidence that we shouldn't be overpaying? Interested to know where you sit on this.
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. If the thought is that we are bringing in Houston as a midfielder that could play halfback, I've heard that as said by people.
Yeah, makes me want to throw up, Lockie.
But that's exactly what the situation, as I remember, it was with Williams, where it's like, yeah, well, he's not necessarily a midfielder. He's gone in there sometimes and kicked a bunch of goals in finals. So now he'll just be that for us. So running that back makes me ill. But Dan Houston has shown more in his career than Williams had when we were looking at him. So this feels different.
He's obviously a superstar player, clearly. 2 All-Australians, best halfback flanker currently in the competition. But is he the exact type of player you think we need when you're looking at the issue in the halfback and maybe trying to complement the team we have? We were discussing a little bit before we went on air. Maybe this will be a bit of a short episode, but I was trying to compare. It's an easy thing to do at this time of year. Well, who just won the flag, Brisbane, and how far off are we to them? And when I was looking at it, I felt like our lists kind of matched up in a similar way that we've built it. You look at the midfield of Brisbane, it's not really that fast. You look at our midfield, that's what gets thrown around all the time, slow midfield. And look, Dunkley, Ashcroft, and Neil aren't necessarily blessed with speed. McCluggage isn't that fast. So I'd say that midfields are kind of similar. It's probably what they have surrounded themselves with everywhere else that I'm looking at to try and compare. You look at, Coleman, Zorko off the halfback, Wilmot onto that as well. High half forwards of, Bailey and Rayner, Archie around that as well. They've got speedy, versatile players to complement it. McCluggage on the wing is a versatile ball winner. Jasper Fletcher's a decent winger as well. They've got these complementary players that spread when you win the ball, that can pinch hit in the midfield at stages. That's probably what we need to do to build around this team. I'm starting to get very much into the mold of let's play Walshy on the wing in that McCluggage role and split it. I know Pommy's been very hot on that for quite some time. Go with the midfield of Cripps, Chera, and Hewitt. I think Hollands can play that high half forward role. Can Cottrell be the other? Maybe. It's probably where we lack that mid forward. Halfback Sard can play one of those roles. We probably don't have the other. It's Newman, it's Chincotta, it's Boyd. That's probably not right. So is Dan Houston that complementary player that can play that, say, Dane Zorko, Darcy Wilmot role, the other run and gun nippy player? Or is he more of a, I don't know, because I don't see him as that speedy player, run and carry, but I think our backline needs as a point of difference. But am I wrong in thinking we need that?
No, you took me through this exercise in more detail before we started, and I think it's spot on. When I think about Zorko and Wilmot and that kind of player for their team, like a player that explodes with just the desire to attack, right? And like I think about watching Zorko and that's just his whole game is just like how can we set this up and move the ball forward with pace and overlap and that kind of thing. And it's just not there for us right now when I think about our players. And it probably isn't Houston either.
Yeah. And that's my kind of issue with this. And I was doing probably almost should have been in the list analysis as well. So if you want more of this, let me know. I can maybe conjure up a bit of an episode somewhere. But I was just trying to think, what are our strengths? Let's say I'm starting fresh at the Carlton Football Club, because so much gets spoken about slow midfield, no good. You can't win with a slow midfield, whatever. You need other players in there. And I'm starting to think, okay, well, let's say what we've got and let's complement that rather than trying to upheave the whole squad. Okay, strengths. Key defender, Jacob Wiedering. We've got some gun intercept defenders, McGovern, Kemp, Newman as a smaller intercept, Cowan in that role. We've got some really handy players through there. Ball winners at the contest, Cripps and Hewitt. How good's this? We've got Walsh and Chera that are complementary players, accumulators around that. We've got, some elite wingers in Blake Acres. You've got Ollie Hollins that'll run all day. Key forwards. You've got two of the best key forwards in the competition that every single club would want, and even just one of them. We've got two. How many clubs have two of them? So let's utilize this to our advantage. Our weakness clearly is maybe that second key defender, some run and carry, other than Saad, who at the moment he either can't do it because of his body or the game plan or system isn't allowing him to. We need some dynamic movement around that midfield and high half forward. We need a goal kicking small, clearly. So I'm looking game plan wise. Okay, what are we needing here? And our weaknesses right now is run and speed, or speed of ball movement from the back half. We get pinned in our defensive half. We can't move the ball. We put ourselves into bad, tight space and we make ourselves predictable. Long to the high half forward on the boundary, all of a sudden, there's less of the ground that you can kick to. It's just not helping us. Makes us have to go long down the line. There's a lack of midfield support and spread. I think when we do win the ball, when you look at the best teams, you look at Hawthorn and Brisbane in particular this year, Collingwood the previous year, there's a clear identity that this is how we spread. Every team does it differently. I'm not sure ours is clear. It feels like sometimes ours is just run and hope down the middle and hope it pays off.
Yeah.
So we need players all to be moving in unison, because sometimes when there's no movement ahead of the ball, it's not working. And then, space and isolation inside 50 for our key forwards. That's their weakness. So, okay, how do we fix this? How do we complement this? Well, we need to support our midfield balls. I think you just get the dynamic support around that. That's the halfbacks. That's the high half forwards being those dynamic players. Wingers being dynamic might be where Sam Walsh comes into this. How many wingers can beat Sam Walsh one-on-one? And is that a point of difference we can use to complement things? So that's kind of where I'm looking at it, seeing is that way that we can shift how we play. And to go back to Dan Houston, as much as I love him, I see him as just an upgrade of Nick Newman, to be kind of not complimentary at all. And a lot of, if you don't support Carlton, you'll probably say, okay, he's a lot better than Nick Newman. I agree. But we're upgrading almost the style of play of what we have. And is that increase worth what we're paying, Lockie? Because Port want two first rounders. Would you pay 2 first rounders for Dan Houston?
No, I wouldn't.
Would you pay 2 first rounders for any halfback flanker in the competition?
No, I don't think so. I
agree.
Unless you've got a name to throw at me, I don't think so.
No. Unless they are someone that genuinely has proper scope to play midfield, that, like, Nick Dacos style, where it's like, okay, this guy's playing halfback, but we know he's going to be a midfielder in like a year or so, and they are young. I just don't see any world where you should be paying that much for a halfback flanker. If anyone can find me a trade in the history of the competition where anyone has paid this much for a halfback flanker and it's worked, I feel like we're the only team that pays up and it doesn't seem to work for us. So because look, the big thing I've said on Twitter when Port fans have come at me for saying I don't think Carlton should pay up is, look, Port well and truly should be asking for 2 first. He's contracted till 2027. He's said he's happy to stay. They have every right to be demanding a king's ransom for their player. If someone's dumb enough to pay it, go for it. But this is where I'm talking about that separation. The buying club, that doesn't mean they just have to pay it. They can just walk away. And if I'm Carlton right now, I still don't think we should be paying a first for him because I don't think he's the player we need. But if we're offering a first and that's not good enough, and maybe we're haggling and saying, okay, maybe a future second, we get something back, and Porter's saying, no, it's 2 first, then I'm walking away. What deal would you be happy with if you could wave a realistic wand to get Port to come to the table? What would you be willing to, your max bid? I guess let's silent auction this. You get to put out your max highest bid for Dan Houston. What would that be?
Oh boy, Ian. Yeah, okay. So the future first and future second, assuming that we are, I guess, if you assume that they are our picks and that we're good next year, so that would then be a pick in the low to mid teens and a pick in the low 30s, right?
Yeah. No, I agree. And even then, I'm going, I don't think I want to sacrifice all of next year's draft picks because that feels like that hamstrings you, and that's probably list management suicide. I feel like our biggest thing is give up a future first, which at this stage, we're trying to potentially maneuver Gold Coast pick 13 to bring that across as this year's draft is a little bit more exciting. Gold Coast don't need pick 13 as that'll just get wiped up by the Leo Lombard bid. So that pick is worthless to them. It's us and Collingwood at the moment haggling for it. I'd say Collingwood are in a better position simply because we're offering a future first. Yeah, that's cool. But we're not offering them a player that they want. Noble has nominated Gold Coast, so they have to get that deal done. So Collingwood is saying, okay, well, let's switch some first here. So it makes more sense for Gold Coast to have to do that deal. Do you see any way that we can prize that pick 13 from Gold Coast over Collingwood at this stage? If that gets the deal done for Houston?
Yeah, but I don't think it would. I don't think it would get it done. And yeah, I just still, my gut feel is that this just won't happen.
Yeah, me too. And I don't think we should be. I don't think the value that we're getting back for getting Dan Houston is worth it in really any sense. If it was a future first, maybe. But again, we have other list needs. And how many halfback flankers change your list so much? We saw it with Saad. It didn't really do a great deal. Like, I love Saad, and he's clearly improved us, but it hasn't won us a flag. I don't think Dan Houston will win us a flag with that. And I've said in previous podcasts that we're getting a guy at the peak of his powers who only can regress from here. Is that worth the value you're giving up?
And that's why I think, to go back before, this is why I think about Sam De Koning so differently. As a key pillar, obviously younger, but more even just the key pillar part. Like, how incredible has it been for us to have Wiedering for these
They're hard to find.
9-10 years? So that's why that conversation is so much more open than this one. So I'm with you.
I'll throw out a player instead. Now, there's been no link. I don't know even if we were interested, whether he would go to us because it's so far down the trade scenario now. He might be well and truly happy to go to, I think it's Adelaide that's been linked at this stage, but Caleb Daniel from the Dogs. If you're wanting a low salary, don't have to give up a lot. If we're desperately saying we need this position, this Dan Houston position of someone who's got a bit of run and carry, good foot skills, He's out of favour at the dog, so he's going to be cheap. I'd say probably a third rounder is all you need to pay for him. As a cheaper alternative, if you had to get someone for this position, is that something that would interest you, or would you again just prefer to not bring in anyone?
I'm surprised he's only 28. It feels like he's been around far longer. Yeah, okay. I guess if that's the kind of value that you think it would take, like, he's not slotting into our best team. Would you agree with that?
I'd say he'd be borderline. There's one spot in our back seven I think is up for grabs at the moment. Let me just try and rank them live on air, because you've got Wiedering, you've got Gov, you've then got obviously the Kemp, as I'm just going the talls. You got three talls.
Yeah.
You got Sard, then Newman, Cowan, and you got the last one. Now, is that last one, is it Chincotta, is it Boyd? I've got Chincotta at the moment, but I'd say Daniel probably slots into that mold of player.
Sure. Okay.
He's in with a shout, but I don't think he's a walk-up start. But if we're looking to improve that position and we need to bring in someone, is throwing a third rounder at him better than throwing 2 firsts at Dan Houston? Or are you just saying leave the position completely?
I'm open to it. I saw such little of him this year.
Didn't play a lot.
To know. Well, yeah, he played 16 games, but I feel like a lot of them must have been sub games, right? So, yeah, I'm open to that discussion. Like I said,
I just think there's more in the halfback flanker position. You can get value elsewhere. Look at D'Ambrosio for Hawthorn, and so many other clubs have been able to find guys or just draft a midfielder and play him there for 2 years. Is this Billy Wilson? Is that what he's going to do this year and take a step up and play off halfback with good ball use? That's where he played that's where he played all his footy, like under 18s, was off that halfback. For me, it's a no on Dan Houston. And I can't, like, if I could just get Dan Houston, amazing. There's just no trade that I can see that Port would accept that I am excited about right now.
I don't think it's going to happen.
But convince me in the comments if you're all for Dan Houston. Let me know your thoughts, because that's the big talking point, really, this offseason. Is he worth it? And both of us say no. Key forward depth, there's really no one. It'd be maybe Liam McMahon in a rookie draft if we have a spot, or a real last throw for a list spot, but nothing exciting. Small forwards, there's 2 names I'll throw at you. Are they better than what we have, Lockie? Malcolm Roses Jr. or Jacob Constanti? They're the 2 that are available. Roses is, I believe, contracted, but clearly they've said they're happy to entertain him leaving the Suns. Constanti, more of a pressure forward. He's out of contract at the Swans, hasn't played yet. Is this just adding for the sake of adding?
Yeah, I would rather back in what we've got here for at least another year.
Yeah. So that isn't very exciting, Lockie. We haven't bought in anyone except for Nick Haynes. So talk me through Nick Haynes, and are you happy that we've brought him in?
Yeah, I am. I think, like we were assuming, and now Austin kind of confirmed it, it's just basically a swap of what Marchbank was for us in terms of depth, with his complete lack of availability over the years. And that's not to say that Haynes is not going to get injured. Of course, he can get injured too, and he is older. Like, is he the oldest guy on our list now? If not, he's one of the oldest.
Yeah.
But I'm happy. I think he's been in successful teams in the past. He'll bring a different kind of leadership down there in terms of off field and all of that kind of thing. So I think rather than if this choice was just between Marchbank for another year and him, I would do this 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, look, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I don't really need to add a lot more to it. That Marchbank replacement, we still need probably a taller defender. He's 33, which is the worry. But, he's at least been available and fit, whether they played him or not at GWS. If Gov's injured, sweet, he comes in. I think it's a frugal move. He won't be on a lot of money. And that's fine. That is a smart thing to do to bolster your list better than Lewis Young. Maybe just not in the position. So the sad thing is we haven't really bought any players in, Lockie. So let's take a look at who's come in and who's sort of made their way out here. It's not looking amazing so far. We kind of haven't addressed a lot of our list needs. Nick Haynes comes in. Now, we've already committed to Matt Duffy as a Category B rookie. We know we'll be getting Ben and Lucas Camporelli in. We've said we want to use pick 12 in the draft. We may be potentially trying to use our future picks to get another pick, whether that's to trade to Houston or just to use again, or whether we'll be able to use pick 34 in the draft before a bid comes for Ben. We said we want to take 4 picks, so let's add that to the list, all of those in. We've traded Carroll away. We've traded Owies away. We've kept Kennedy. We've kept Young. I forgot to mention him. Poor Matt Carroll. I've said we've kept him on the rookie list as well at this stage. That basically leaves us one player short, Lockie. That's 36 on the senior list. That's 5 Cat A rookies, 2 Cat Bs, and that's 7 rookies in total. That means we can either bring on one more Cat A rookie, is that Liam McMahon in the rookie draft to get another key forward depth, or do we then look to keep a Carroll Owies, or do we bring in anyone else? What are you are you happy with just that being the sort of ins and outs, or do you really think we just need way more?
It's underwhelming when you summarize it like that. Like I said an hour ago when we started this, I feel confident that we can compete for the premiership next year without any big additions. So I can't then say that when there's not a whole lot of change like this, that I don't think that's possible, because I think it is. And then it's just the opportunity cost of weighing up the potential players that could come in versus the guys that we said, like Owies and Carroll. You know, what kind of value do they have by being on the list? It seems like they want to be able to prioritize Motlop and Williams and Durden in the forward line. So Owies, if he's just not getting a game and he's playing in the twos every week, then
No, I agree. And I think the thing that we probably need to do in this is try to maneuver whether those players are leaving and it's those picks. I think the more important thing that I'm seeing from the trade period is there's not a lot of actual players ready to go to trade for. It's the draft picks that we probably need to focus on more than anything else, and getting higher up the draft, because at the moment we've got pick 12, pick 34, and then 65, 68, 71 will disappear for the Camporelli twins bids. So how are we getting a higher pick than maybe 34? And where that stands at this stage, as we mentioned, that Gold Coast pick 13, given that they will have a bid for Leo Lombard within the first 10, definitely, that pick will disappear. So they need to get rid of it. Fortunately, it looks like Collingwood are in pole position for that. So where else can we look? Now, I've had a bit of a deep dive into the draft picks. Let me know what you think. These. We've got GWS pick 21. Currently, they have picks 15, 16, 21, 37. Would they potentially prefer, I know they're losing a few players, but would they prefer to maybe move on a pick 21 for a future pick, given that maybe they want to have a bit more value next year as well, rather than having to just use all their picks this year? I haven't deep dived enough, but do they have all those list spots? Do they need all of those picks used? Maybe there's a shout to off them up a little bit of something special for next year and get higher into the draft this year. The other one that I think is the most plausible out of all of these is Richmond, because they're going to be getting in a lot of picks, Lockie, when you look at their trades and everything that is happening right now, because Bolton will be going to Freo, Baker will be going to the Eagles, Rioli is going to Gold Coast. So they're going to have a plethora of early picks for all of those. Hard to keep track of how many and all of those are going into the football club. Clearly, they can't use all of them. They'll want a lot of them. They can't use them all. So they surely, if they're smart, will be haggling and maybe trading away one of the ones that they get in for some future picks so they can spread this massive draft haul and redevelopment over a couple of seasons. So this is where I would say maybe we can utilize some of our future picks and get, maybe it's pick 18, maybe it's pick 24, and bring in just a higher elite young talent into this football club. And that's maybe how we get it done. Is that something that it would excite you about really attacking the draft that Nick Austin's talking about, being able to maneuver those future picks and hit and strike now?
Yeah, I think you've sold me on it with everything that you hear about the strength of the class and through the research and stuff that you've done. I'd assume that is something that you like the sound of too.
Yes, definitely. So look, one of our we're doing obviously. Yeah, so we'll be doing a lot more content, obviously, before the year wraps up. If any big trades happen, we'll be on here to react to them. We'll be doing a trade review show, and then the draft as well. We'll be building that up and reviewing it. But this is just a little bit of an early taste, I guess, on the draft, because part of the moves that happen in the trade period and to fill all the list holes that we have at the moment, clearly it's looking like the draft. That's what Nick Austin was saying. We might be, all our future picks are basically up for grabs because we want to get into this draft class. So I'm just going to throw out some names to you at the moment. They'll mean absolutely nothing to pretty much everyone because there's not a lot of access to the draft. You have to be an absolute loser like me to spend all your spare minutes watching their football to have any kind of idea at the moment. But I think there's a lot of, this has been sort of sprouted is not the word I wanted at all. Spouted as one of the biggest drafts that there's been in a while, because there is a lot of green shoots, Lockie, that are sprouting throughout this draft class. So I want to take you through a couple of names that we can look to target at these early picks. Key defender, Luke Trainer. He's a little bit more undersized, a little bit more of your intercept player, but looks like that's what Vossi likes. Say with our first pick, there's a chance he's still there. He just has such great foot skills and just an absolute star. Really, really exciting. Apart from him, I mean, there's a lot of key defensive talent in this draft. Matt Whitlock, there's basically these twins in there, the Whitlock brothers. One's a key defender, one's a key forward. It's like the Mackay twins. Matt down in defense looks like someone that could be really exciting as a prospect. And then there's a guy like Noah Mraz who, look, we love the name already because of the Jason Mraz sort of comparison. I'm yours. I tell you what, that'll be getting a play if anyone drafts him. But this guy, Lockie, 198 centimeters. He is a man mountain, which is kind of exactly what we need. I would say that he would be someone you'd be able to snag with one of those early second round picks rather than the early pick. Same with maybe a Matt Whitlock being a later first round selection. So I think there's a lot of key tools in this draft that make me excited that if we didn't strike early, we can get one with our second pick. So while they probably aren't ready to play round one next year, our window is the next 3 or so years. I think this is what we need to be targeting, because right now we don't have anyone developing under Jacob Wiedering. I think we need to pick up one of those guys. Speedy halfbacks, if we want one, Lockie. If we're desperate with our early pick, Toby Travalia is the guy. He's one of my favorite players in this draft. He is very, very skinny, but he's this tall, lanky, blonde bloke that he intercepts everything. And as soon as he gets it, you know what he does, Lockie? He takes off like an absolute rocket.
We like that.
There's this guy, I don't know who it is, find it on YouTube, who has sliced up pretty much all the draftees' little highlights package. Every single one of Toby's, he's just grabbed the ball and run 50 meters with it, electric through everyone. I'd much rather use our first round pick on him than pick up Dan Houston at this stage, because we're going to be paying a lot more than just a first round pick. And that excites me. And there's also a few others if you really need. There's a Harrison Oliver, there's a Lockie Jacques if you need other halfbacks, but don't think we need to. Small forwards is where I'd be striking in the first round. I'd be going Joe Berry. He is so exciting. He knows exactly where the goals are. He's speedy, can kind of go higher up in the ground if you need him to and be around the contest. He likes to just hit the contest with speed. his speed, his goal kicking, his tackling. We need a small forward. He's someone I can see playing round one straight away. So that's where I'd be looking. And, if we end up getting a key defender early, there's still Jesse Detoli or Oliver Hannaford that you could potentially snag as those sort of second pick in the draft that are also, small forwards that can pinch hit a little bit in the midfield, maybe even play a little high half forward. So this is like, when I'm looking at this draft class, Lockie, there's just so many names that I think fit so many of our needs right now. The only one I say probably isn't there at our selections is that dynamic mid that we're really wanting to burst through. They're all going to go within the top 10, and the others kind of past that are either more of your small forward or your big-bodied inside midfielder that we've kind of got plenty of. So the small forward key defender, strike while the iron's hot, get those list needs in the draft. That's probably where I would be looking to address them. Guess to round out this episode, knowing that, I guess, list need, there's a plethora of them in the draft. Does that make you feel a little bit more confident that we can address all of our listings headed into next season by attacking the draft? Do you think that the Nick Austin strategy is the correct one, or is it the window right now? I don't care how you get it done. Bring in a Sam De Koning because we need a win right now. What's your kind of attitude when it comes to this in this trade period?
It's funny because I feel like this is consistent with my view on these kind of things. Both of those scenarios I could definitely be able to get behind. A strong draft class with guys that, I back your judgment on these kind of things, that will be able to potentially not impact from day one, but be a really strong foundation is great. But also, if there was a way to get someone like Sam De Koning in that meant that it didn't allow us to get as much of this 18, 19-year-old talent, but was a key pillar for the next 8 to 10 years, I'd support that too. How's that for a fence sit?
It's a good fence sit because I think I agree with you, Lockie. Either one, if we're bringing in a player we need, perfect.
Yep.
But Dan Houston isn't that. So that's where my opinion is. I'm very happy to attack the draft because it is really one of the most sort of deep drafts for a while. And I think when you're looking at our list needs, I'm seeing plenty of names that excite me. But let me know your thoughts on everything we have covered. Who are you re-signing? Who are you trading? Who are you delisting? And most importantly, who are you bringing in? Are there any names we didn't discuss that you think we should be well and truly across throughout this trade period? Let us know in the comments on YouTube. If you're listening in audio form, let us know on the socials at Navy Blue Corner. But if there's any breaking news throughout this trade period, we'll be here to discuss and dissect it all. And if there's not, our next episode will be the trade period review. So make sure you like and subscribe and follow so you never have to miss an episode when it drops throughout the next few weeks. But that's going to wrap this all up. Up the bloody baggers. See you guys next time.